Hey everyone, I'm Jeanette Johnson, the Booked Agent.
And I am Ashley Kaya Lindsay, a realtor who reads.
Yes, and welcome to the Booked Club. So we just decided on a name, thank God, because we were doing it before, and if you've seen the other videos, we were going through the reading order for Throne of Glass, and then we did a review on Assassin's Blade. So we're kicking it off. We're finally got it together, and we're going to be doing a review on Throne of Glass,
Ta-da!
the book that has earned the series its title, and honestly, a phenomenal book. I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 4 stars on my ratings app. I know you do like out of a 10, she does a 10 scale. I do a 5 scale, but I gave it 4 stars.
On my 10 scale, I give it a 7.
There we go. That's not good. That's up there.
I mean, because I feel like 5 is like readable and doable, and 6 is a little
Not
better.
many things get 5s for me anymore.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
right?
Sometimes you're like, sometimes you read something, you're like, this is a 20. Like, if I could scale this, so it's like, all I can give it is a 5, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just start giving the things I really enjoyed, but like, I'm not about to sit here and rave about it, a 4.
See, and that's why I have to do the 10, because I feel like when I have a 10, I have more wiggle
you got room to
be
give
like,
it a little bit extra boost.
8 could be this, a 9 is like, okay, because I feel like it'd be impossible to be a 10 too. Like, I don't know, it's...
Right.
I have my 10s, we're not getting into that.
Right.
My biased 10s.
Hey, however you rank your books is how you rank your books. We can't, judge you on that scale. This was a 4 for me, but it is the kickoff book of Throne of Glass series. It does follow the assassin Celaena, whom if you read it in the chronological order, then you read the Assassin's Blade, so you already got to know Celaena a little bit and her journey in Ardalan as an assassin, and some of the little pit stops and friendships she made along the way, or enemies, however you want to look at it. But here, that book ends where she, Sam dies, and
spoiler alert.
She goes bananas. Homegirl goes bananas and says, "Oh, you killed my man? Well, guess what? I'm coming for you. I'm coming for all of you." And she gets set up by her trusted,
long-standing father / I don't know what he is.
Shady man. She gets betrayed by him, and essentially the king of Ardalan captures her, puts her in, makes her his prisoner, and she gets whipped, and horrible things happens to her for, I think this takes over a span of a year that she's in jail.
At one point she tries to escape, and she ended up essentially getting further than anyone had ever gotten, and all that kind of.
I think I was questioning her assassin abilities in Assassin's Blade, and then Throne of Glass came out, and I was like, okay, I still think she could improve. She's still young, but she was like, okay, listen, I'm getting out of here. So all that to say, the king wants to basically find somebody to be his right-hand man.
His champion is what they...
Yes, the title that they give them. So they want somebody to be his champion, and he kind of says, all right, we're going to do these trials, and we're going to make them fight each other. We're going to make them figure out if they can discover if this is poison or not. We're going to make them try to survive, and the last man standing is going to be my champion, and I'm going to send them on odd projects to assassinate people and whatever deed he needs to get done.
And as these people are picked, essentially it's almost like, think of like Hunger Games, how like Haymitch is the sponsor of Katniss, and you know what I mean, each one of them has a sponsor, someone who's kind of more responsible for them, or someone who in this case have kind of picked their person that they want to go on behalf, because whoever ends up winning, of course ends up getting the good grace of the king, the person who's the sponsor.
Yeah, so. And it's somebody in the court essentially saying, oh, I've got the champion, and you as the person who's sponsoring this, like she said, the Hunger Games, you want them to win. So you're going to help them train, you're going to, make sure that they're fit. And then we get introduced to Dorian, which if you've read this series, that's some of, this world's favorite character.
Big deal, Mr. Big Deal.
I love Dorian, but I still love Kale is like my man. Like I love Kale. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's
especially
more of his journey.
Especially in this book. I'm like
yes,
yeah,
like that's
no,
my guy.
That's my guy.
So you get introduced to Dorian, who is young. I believe he's 19, and he's the prince. So he is the king's son. He does have a brother that you don't hardly meet. So Dorian is kind of like next in line, and he's like, listen, we're gonna bring her from the prison, and we're going to sponsor her as our champion, and she's going to win. I just know it. And he sets her up with Kale, who is the king's hand.
And really like his best friend.
Yeah, they grew up together. And he sets her up with him to do training and stuff. Kale doesn't trust her for shit. He's like, I don't know.
Oh. All right.
We're getting into it, okay? I'm getting serious.
Okay.
We can bleep that. It's fine.
No, what? Are we gonna
if you
that?
consider it to be a cuss, you know?
No.
She said, oh my God. She clutched her pearls, I think.
Okay. So here we go.
Kale doesn't trust Selena. He's like, listen, she
is a killer.
Know what the stuff she's done? Like
she's capable of all kinds of things, and obviously he's concerned about the well-being of not only being, hand of the king, being, right-hand man of the king. He's also concerned, obviously, about the safety of his best friend.
He's like, and then Dorian's kind of like catching feelings for her. He's like, she's beautiful and she's cool and she's kind of like a badass, So I think Kale like witnesses that, and he's like, I gotta protect my friend because I don't need him getting roped up with the wrong types of women. Okay.
Because meanwhile, back at the farm, his mother has been trying to set him up so that he could end up getting somebody that he wants to be with. People who are, I'm sure, more appropriate. Who are I know that at one point he ends up talking to, what is her name?
Well, he talks to there's the one girl,
she's
obsessed with him, and she does not like Selena at all. Which, by the way, when he brings her into the court to compete in this challenge, they change her name because she does have a reputation being Arlen's biggest assassin. So they're like, instead of us even bringing this stuff up, we're going to call you Lilith. Like, we're just going to create a completely new identity for you. And if you have read this series, you know that Selena has like 17 names.
Yes.
I don't know why Sarah did this to us, because there's already like at least 100 characters to keep track of. And names in real life are hard, but names in fantasy novels are like...
Because they have them are like all super made up. Thankfully, they end up going like Lillian, and Lillian ends up being like...
And you're like, okay, I can do that.
But then even when you're reading it, of course, like they'll speak to her and be calling her Lillian, but then in your point of view as you're reading it, they're still calling her Selena. So you're like, okay, keep up.
Who is who? But yeah, so they introduce her as that, and then the lady who's like fishing for Dorian, who actually ends up being a very major character. So I hate that I'm blanking on her name right now, but it's gonna come to me, and we're gonna just pop it in there.
I will say it's Catelyn, but I could be wrong. Catelyn, something like that.
Yeah, pronunciation, it's hard. We're gonna have another episode where we just go through all the names of Throne of Glass, and we'll see if we got it right.
Yeah, because like when I'm not sure about a name, honestly, I just kind of go through and I'll be like, K, and every time I'm just like, oh, K just spoke again, and that's just the end of it.
We're like, whatever. Okay. So yeah, we dealt with that a lot in this book, but they introduce her as somebody else because they don't want to basically blow up her disguise. But along the way, a lot of crazy stuff happens. She starts discovering certain like mystical things, and this world that they do live in, power existed, magic existed a long time ago, but since the king of Arlen had sat on the throne, he banished magic. So
like a literal witch hunt, okay?
Yeah, and there's still continents that magic exists, but on this continent in their world, magic does not exist. And if you do have it, or if there's any suspicion that there's magic out there, you're done. So
they kind of touch on a little bit on the journey from when she's originally going from where she was imprisoned to Rithbold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They kind of touch on it a little bit. She has this kind of disbelief. You know how it is with the major characters, one of the disbelieving. So at first, even though, there's all these clues and maybe belief in magic, our main character is a little,
Well, Selena, I would say, like, honestly, I love that, you know, we've made it through this series because you see such a shift in her character. And I know I've said that before, but like when you meet Selena, you meet this disgruntled teenager who is mad at the world, but has so much power at her disposal, almost too much for her age and for her, you know, naivety on what is actually going out in the world. And people are starting to notice, like, you're kind of that girl. Like, you can succeed in life and you can do a lot of stuff. And she's like, I just want riches, comfort, and that's it. Like, don't bother me for anything else.
But it's because of a lifestyle that she was accustomed to from an Assassin's Blade. You kind of see that that's the way that she was raised by her handlers. It's kind of like another way, almost to keep her
contained, keep her wanting to come back. Like, we'll dangle a jewelry in front of you, and that's going to make you want to come back because, you know, like, we're feeding the cat. Like, they were feeding the stray cat with her. Like, you're going to come back for this meal, okay? So that was kind of this. And then with this deal, she has the opportunity to kind of win her freedom. So she's like, okay.
Oh, I remember this part because at first she was like trying to negotiate. There were like 5 years of being the assassin, and you'd be able to have your freedom.
Do whatever
she asked
you
for
want.
3. They settled at 4, even though I don't know what kind of authority Dorian has, but he negotiated 4.
He was, I'm telling you, Dorian was like a little puppy dog for Selena in this book. Like, he was like, please, sir, can I have some more? I know.
He's not used to, like, he's used to a certain kind of woman, I feel like, in his upbringing.
And there's going to be some spoilers in here because we just cannot give a full review without kind of breaking down our opinions. And this is really for, if you want to watch around, you know, if you haven't read it and you want to stick around, please do. And you're okay with a few spoilers. But if you have read it and you just wanted to get like a second opinion, we see you. We're talking about it.
So this is the stop point if you don't want any like serious spoilers. Because serious spoilers are now.
Yes.
Okay.
So Dorian's little puppy dog actions, right? The funniest part was when they kissed, right? And she finally was like, okay, like, I'm kind of giving him a little extra, feeling him a little bit. And he's like trying to cuddle with her in bed, and she's like, nah. She just gets the ick and just basically says, yeah, no, we're no longer doing this. And he's like, why? Like, he was so devastated.
And then on the low, his boy starts getting a little jealous, and even though he tries to act like everything's all fine, it's like it went from him being more like protective of him to kind of being like.
But see, Kayal and her relationship, and I think this is also why Kayal's one of my favorite characters, is because like he built her up a lot, you know what I mean? And even though he was not fully trusting of her in the beginning, he saw the most intimate sides of her because he would walk her around the court because she technically was still a prisoner. He would train her all the time.
They had the most personal time.
They had so much personal time. She would sit in his rooms and
which
they
you
would
cannot
chat,
do that.
Read books. Yeah, I mean, like she was kind of getting, she ran that.
I mean, but they were like, I would say at first it definitely went from like, you know, of course, enemies to lovers. Well, you know, kinda.
Well, you know what's interesting is I've seen, so when I finished this book, and I used to use Goodreads as my form of book tracking and book reviews. And Goodreads, the people who do reviews on Goodreads, if you're one of them, go in, like, I mean, paragraphs, like animations, like they go full on detailed reviews, which is very fun to watch after you've, or read after you finish the book.
Only after you finish though, because there's always spoilers.
Yeah, I don't ever read it before. But after I finish, I immediately say, okay, I want to see if, like, it's kind of like reading the comment section. Like, I want to see if somebody else thought the same thing.
They're feeling like what I'm feeling. It feels validation in the things that you were thinking about.
People tore this book up. They were like, I can't even believe this disgrace of a love story in here.
Oh my gosh.
Which I fully prepared myself to know that there's no romance in these books because it's truly a fantasy novel. It's truly an action-packed fantasy novel.
And it really doesn't even get more developed until I feel like even
later in the books, and even the love stories that are in here, like, it's not the main focus. It's not the plot.
Which I think makes something better. I mean, it should have its own category of stuff. Like, you know, it doesn't always have to be.
I think this is gender friendly. Like, if you're
and age appropriate, if you're okay with gore type stuff.
Yeah.
Up until about book 4.
Up until about book 4, but even with that, I still think it's not very graphic.
Yeah.
Like, because you can still, it gives you a little taste. Like, if you were to watch a movie and you got like a nice intimate scene in there, you know what I mean?
Like a kiss and then fade to black kind of thing, not like a
Yeah, there's not much spice in these books. So like if you're wondering if you should pass this over to, your teenager, I would say it's safe to do that. But at your discretion, But people were not excited about there being any romance or love interest in this. I'm like, how do you read a story without not a single love interest? What do you mean? You have to have it. So the fact that she was throwing two guys around, I was like, I love that.
So like, look, they're like, oh, hey girl. It's like, hey girl. And she's like, all right.
She's like, whatever.
She's like, actually, I was just a slave for a little while.
Not you tonight, you tomorrow. How about that?
My priorities are a little...
Yeah.
And just in case you're not sure, also, there's this, someone is trying to kill trying to be assassins, what is it? Oh, you saw them, all the
competitors.
All the competitors.
So basically, survival of the fittest, right? So very much a Hunger Games-esque. Don't want to keep comparing it to the Hunger Games because it's not a Hunger Games book, and I've read some that are like, this is just a knockoff of the Hunger Games. This is not like that, but in the best way for you to maybe understand the kind of competition. Survival of the fittest. So you might not make it throughout the night. Why? We don't know, but if you didn't survive, you didn't survive. And somebody is just offing all of the competitors, and they're not understanding why. Especially because, like we said, things start getting magical, things start getting weird. They're not supposed to have magic. There's these figurines and signs that are getting popped up, and Celaena finds some secret tunnel
inside of her room,
attached to her room, and she starts getting cryptic messages
and kind of like calls to her. She ends up trying to kind of discover what's going on.
Yeah, so I loved that aspect of it too, especially coming from Assassin's Blade, because I was like, okay, is this just a book about somebody beating people up, or are we going to get into the fantasy? And this, I started with saying, okay, there's fantasy in these books. Like, there's magic.
At first, it doesn't feel that way.
It doesn't. It feels very just action. Like, yeah.
And then as you start to get into it, because like I love the fantasy aspects of things. Like almost everything that I read has a fairy or a mermaid or something.
Right. Yeah. I need a little bit
witch.
Of magic.
Like
I need to break the barriers of reality a little bit. Like, that's why I enter into these novels, because I want to know that somebody not only can beat someone up, but like hit them across the head without using their hands. Like, I want to see that.
And I like that magical aspect, especially in general with women characters, not pertaining to this in particular, but in general. I do like women to have magic, because I feel like it helps even the playing field, because it takes a physical aspect out of things.
Yeah, like when they're fighting all these men, I don't feel as like, why are these men beating her up? But it's like, I mean, she can kind of like put in work, you know what I mean? She's probably better than them.
Or why is like she beating them up when it's like, girl, you 100 pounds wet, and this guy's like 300 pounds. Like, you're not making me believe this.
Like,
I'm sorry.
But yeah, so they go and have they're offing people. She's worried because she's like, I don't know if they're coming for me next. They find these discovery called word marks, and the word marks kind of like open a new avenue, which is really what kicks off the story, I think. Once you start discovering that the word marks and
pieces of magic.
Yeah, you get pieces of magic, and then you're just like, it hooks you in, and when you finish this book, you're like, oh no, I gotta keep going.
It's a good setup. It's a good setup for the next book.
Now, what upset me, because we're gonna start going into some critiques here, okay? And I will say the ending upset me, upset me, because I think she kind of went back to not knowing how to be an assassin. Like, how did you get drugged before your final competition?
Well,
when you passed the drug, there was a challenge in there where they had to discover a poison. She passed that flying colors, and then you get subjected to the same poison that was in one of those trials, and then you freaking can't fight.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to blame her, or if I want to blame Miss Mass for this, because I feel like...
Oh, I was about to say, I blame Sarah.
She's more so... That's okay,
I blame Sarah.
Because I feel like she did that because obviously ended up letting her be able to kind of see into other things, because then while she was poisoned, she was able to kind of get...
She does get the hallucinations, and she can't disclose if it's like happening to her for real, or if it was just the drugs or whatever. But it just... it almost just solidified how bad of assassin she is for me in my head, because I was like, now come on.
God, you're such
She
a
made
hater.
it this
God,
far.
she be steady hating on
I'm
her
such a hater
assassin.
on her assassin
I
wife.
know.
I was so,
I know.
like, I was so not
Like,
for
let her
it.
live.
Like, don't tell me she's the best if she's not the best. That's how I felt, Sarah. Like, do not label her this, and she's getting beat up every
Well, maybe
second.
these other people are trash. Maybe they're trash because it's not like, I mean, she made it through the book, didn't she? She made it through the book. And who is the king?
And
Who is,
she won.
okay,
She
so
did.
who ends up being the best of the assassins? I think it was 23 other assassins, or maybe 23 including her.
Yeah, I mean, she won by default mostly, but we're not gonna go there. She did win. We knew she was gonna win anyway. Like, how do you have a book series about her if she doesn't win, right?
Well, see,
It's just how does it play out?
and I was like, and that's easy for her to say because, you know, when I was reading this, we didn't know there was going to be more. So every book, it hits different when the book is still developing and going.
Well, that's true.
Because
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, is this going to be it? Oh, is this going to be it? And then, you know, when you know there's a couple of them, then I say, usually when I get to about this part of the book and I don't have enough answers, I'm like, there's going to be
But
some
see,
more.
Sarah does that. Sarah does that in her books. So she will take you through this whole thing, and there's so many layers to her writing, which is honestly one of the reasons why I've been like really enjoying her stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the last 100 pages, you're just like, oh my God, like what are we talking
It's
about
all
here? This
packed,
just
packed,
happened,
packed,
like,
packed,
and then
packed.
something just flies out of nowhere, and you're like fighting off demons and all this crazy stuff. So that's what's happening. This world started opening up, and magic started happening. And I was like, okay, I can get with this, and it made me jump right into the next book because I was on edge reading Assassin's Blade. I did not like that book. I started Throne of Glass, and I was like, okay, it's good, but it's definitely not. I mean, some people are like rating this series as their ultimate favorite. And if you are that person, now I understand why after finishing it. But listen, this was not going to be the best book in the series.
But it's a good startup.
It was a
good startup.
great
You know,
startup. Yeah.
I mean, because
It
to
kicked
me
it
too,
off.
and they make, if you read Assassin's Blade first, it does touch on things from Assassin's Blade because they kind of brush over it here, and Assassin's Blade is definitely more in detail
Yeah.
about some of the stuff, especially when she talks about her past, and when she kind of uses her past as an excuse to keep, you know, the would-be love interest at bay.
So, hey, if you're considering starting this series, you know our opinion. Start with this book. But if you don't start with this book, at least give yourself enough time to get through this and then even the next one to decide if it's like something you actually are interested in and want to move forward with. Because that, I will say from personal experience, that's how long it took me to kind of get into this groove of things and get into the series.
So yeah, and I'm like, and for me, of course, I started with this one, and then I read the second book, and then, you know, when the other one came along later, then I ended up reading it, but I started with this. I could have read the first one, but I feel like when you read the Assassin's Blade, it makes this less interesting almost because you end up
That's how I felt.
there's a whole lot more to it. Like that's going details, and here it's like as they're talking about it, you're like, ooh, you're discovering more about her past. But if you already read Assassin's Blade, you don't need that discovery.
Right. And that's exactly how I felt. So,
But
yeah, thank y'all for watching. Stick around for next episode where we talk about Crown of Night, which is the next book in the series.
get into it. This is awesome.
Like, subscribe, share.